17, I wanted to go to my Scottish friend Jamie's 40th birthday party, but I could hardly justify flying to Scotland for a weekend. So what other fun thing could I do? Jamie lives in Glasgow, and the party was a hiking party in Fort William, the adventure capital of Scotland. Poking around the web, I discovered a long-distance trail, the West Highland Way, which goes from just outside Glasgow all the way to Fort William. Bingo! And to boot, there was another path from downtown Glasgow that joined up with the West Highland Way, so I could literally walk from my Airbnb right to the birthday party around 100 miles away. And this is how I discovered walking holidays. Throughout Europe, old trading paths remain and are open to the public, and naturally a village would emerge about a day's walk apart. The people would obviously choose the easiest route to get from one place to the next in order to trade their goods and move their livestock. So the beauty of these long-distance trails is that they're really not overly difficult. The main thing you're going to need to do is to get your feet used to walking long distances day after day, and you can modify the distances depending on how much time that you have. We'll get more into that later. There are vast networks of these trails throughout Europe, and happily, for the most scenic and historic ones, companies have emerged to assist you on doing these long-distance walks. They take care of all the logistics. I recommend using my affiliate One Foot Abroad, and you can email me for a promo code at kit@activetraveladventures.com. Poke around the One Foot Abroad website, you'll get to see all these amazing walks and actual bike paths as well throughout Europe. They can book these charming inns for you. They arrange to have your luggage picked up each morning, and when you get to your inn, there's your bag waiting for you, so all you need to do is just carry your day pack. They give you a map and an app to help you find your way, and should you run into any difficulties, they're available 24/7. And since these walks are self-guided, the cost is really affordable, which makes it great for Europe. One of the reasons walking holidays have become one of my favorite ways to travel is because it's the epitome of slow travel. You get to drink in the ambiance of the region as you stroll. You meet the locals as just part of your day and theirs. I remember spending an hour just walking with a local guy out walking his dog. I cheered on some ranchers that were trying to catch an errant sheep, and we all had a nice chat and laugh once they were successful. And because you're not out walking the path alone, you're going to meet fellow walkers from around the world and have the time to chat and get to know them. I have made lifelong friends on these long-distance walks, and when I meet up with them in the future, I'm often introducing them to other friends that I met, and then they become their new friends as well, and we form what I call a tangled slinky of friendships from all over the world. It is so cool. These walks are great for solo walkers like myself, for couples, friends, and even families if the young ones are old enough and mature enough. What a wonderful way to reconnect with loved ones and to see them in a completely different light. There are tons of walks throughout Europe, but today we're going to focus on the best ones in the United Kingdom. In the UK, the hills aren't very tall. They're very rarely over 3,000 feet or 1,000 meters. They call them Munros in Scotland. And they speak English, so it's super easy to navigate and to engage with the locals. I personally walked the West Highland Way in Scotland, followed by the Cotswold Way, and then half of the Coast to Coast Way in England. I cannot more highly recommend you considering a walking holiday and cannot wait to share these incredible paths. So let's get started. Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. Today's episode is a modified version of one of my earliest shows back when I was such a nervous wreck trying to record. I don't think I took a breath. So in today's version, I have gone back and edited and put some breathing space in there so it's a lot easier to listen to, and I've added a couple other changes too. So if you listened to it in the past, I encourage you to give it another listen today, and we've come a long ways in the last 7 years. Thanks for listening. Let's get on with the show. Most of the trails I've included today are part of the UK's National Trail System, which was created back in 1965 with the Pennine Way, which made our list today. These trails were, of course, chosen for their charm and natural beauty. And because you're walking, you get to see them up close and personal in a way that you can't do when you're driving. And if you don't speak anything but English, you don't have to worry because here that's what they speak. So that takes one worry off the list. Also, it's very budget friendly. It can even be a super cheap vacation if you backpack it because you can actually camp along most of the trails. While that's an option, another more popular option is to use a self-guided tour company. What the self-guided tour companies do is they make They plan the itinerary. You might give them how many days that you want to do it. They usually offer a few different options. They make all the accommodation arrangements, which is helpful in case there's some changes in the path, like what happened to me in Scotland, where one of the main places to stay was closed down for renovation and you're in the middle of nowhere. And that was the only place to stay. So once I got there, they made arrangements to transport me about 10 miles away to this charming town I want to go back to and explore one day and spend the night, and then pick me up in the morning and took me back to the trail. If I'd been making my own arrangements, I'd have had to go through some incredible logistical hoops to do what they arranged for me. And because they had other travelers to combine us, it was much more economical for them to have a van come pick us up. I would have had to hire a private driver. And it was kind of remote. I doubt there was cabs. So if I wasn't driven, I'd have had to hike an extra 20 miles. So that can come in handy because they do have the local on-the-ground knowledge. In addition, one super nice feature is they also transport your luggage. So all you need to carry is a day pack. So if you're backpacking it, of course, you got to bring all your gear. And alternately, there are some companies that will just transport the luggage for you. I have found that when you add up those fees, it's not that much more if you're not camping to go ahead and use the self-guided tour companies, because it gets pretty close and they save you so much time and aggravation of trying to plan the adventure. It's also nice to have an on-the-ground contact 24/7 available to answer any questions or help you in case of an emergency of any kind. They also include some maps and some tips. So when I do this kind of thing, that's the way that I do it nowadays. Unless I'm going into the backcountry, I will backpack. But when the opportunity is there for me to have somebody else do all the planning and move my luggage, I'm taking that option. The best time to go is going to be between March and October. If you download the free travel planner for this episode, it'll show you the exact months for each of the different hiking trails that we're talking about today. I think, generally speaking, the best time to go is going to be May and also early September if you have that opportunity. You avoid the crowds. There'll still be people out in the trails that you can meet and hang out with throughout the day while you're walking, but it won't be as crowded. Also, you'll avoid some bugs that may come out in the summertime. Of course, you're going to have a greater risk of colder weather if the earlier and the later you go in the shoulder seasons, but I prepare for cold even in the summertime in the UK, because when I was in Scotland, it was freezing on 2 of the days, and I was very glad to have my thermals. And also, I end up buying some waterproof gloves on that Scotland trip that I take with me now everywhere I go where there's any possibility of being cold. You don't need any special kind of technical skills for this, but you should be in decent enough shape that you can walk all day. This is something I'd say anybody from, say, ages 12 and up, mature 12 and up, can do. So if you do decide to use a self-guided touring company, you don't have a guide with you. You are your own guide. They will make the arrangements, plan the itinerary, make the accommodations, do the luggage transfer, and give you some maps to help you get there safe and sound. And again, I recommend my affiliate, One Foot Abroad. Put a link in the show notes. The trails themselves are very well marked. On the national trails in England and Wales, the emblem is an acorn symbol. So when you come to an intersection, you'll see a little acorn carved usually into a post. In Scotland, on the West Highland Way, the symbol on their path was of a thistle. The paths are usually pretty clearly a path. The only time I can recall on the West Highland Way getting a little bit confused was I was busy chatting when I was still in town and therefore still on pavement, and I missed a V in the road and I took the left fork when I should have gone to the right. I realized it within 100 feet. But if you do get a little confused at an intersection, here's some tips. So if I find that I'm not sure, what I do is I take some sticks and stones and I'll make like a little arrow in the path indicating which way I entered the decision path that I chose. So if I decide that I've gone the wrong way and I backtrack back to that intersection, I know to go the other direction and I'll know which way I came from. So that's a good little tip to make sure that you don't get too lost. Another tip, particularly if you're unsure about an intersection, is before you take the turn that you're going to take, is turn around and look and see what the scenery looks like behind you, because you'd be shocked at how often it's totally different than what you see when you're looking forward. So if you do end up backtracking, you'll recognize that intersection and not walk past it. Also look for your little arrow in the path. Let me describe a typical day if you're using the self-guided tour companies. You wake up, usually not too early if you're going to take advantage of the free breakfast. A lot of times that doesn't start until 7 or 8 o'clock. So you have your free breakfast, you load up your stuff, pack up your suitcase, and you deposit it wherever they tell you that they're going to pick up the luggage. Sometimes it's in a little shed. Sometimes it's just at the door of the B&B or wherever it is that you're staying. And it has a little luggage tag on it, and off you go. And you walk and you stop whenever you want, and you have lunch where you want. If you're heading into a remote area, you would grab something to eat to take with you so you'll have something to nibble on along the way. So you walk for several hours, take breaks whenever you want to, and mosey into whatever the village is. I usually would get there sometime in the midday, depending on how fast I was walking, how often I stopped. Then you get cleaned up, your luggage is there waiting for you, and then you enjoy the little town, stroll around the town, check out the local hot spots, pubs, little museums, or whatever it is that you'd like to do. Then the next day you wake up and you head off to the next village. And you're generally out in the countryside, not by roads, so it's very quiet and peaceful and very scenic, obviously, or they wouldn't have chosen these areas to be their national trails. Now that I've given you a brief overview of what to expect, now let's look at the walking paths themselves. I've organized this list by breaking out between England, Scotland, and Wales, and within those areas alphabetically for you. And remember, you can get all the details with the free travel planner at activetraveladventures.com. Put Walking Holidays in the search bar, or you can get the printer-friendly version if you get the monthly newsletter. I only do it once a month. You just click on the newsletter link and sign up if you haven't already. That will give you instant access, and access not just to this, but to every travel planner I've ever covered in the 7 years I've been doing this so far. So to begin in England, we'll start with the Coast to Coast Trail. This is one of the world's most popular hikes. You walk east to west from St. Bees to Robin's Hood Bay, through rolling hills and mountains, quaint farmsteads, and the brooding moors of North Yorkshire. You stay overnight in charming little villages like the ever-popular Grasmere, as you hike through the stunning English Lake District and Yorkshire Dales. At just under 200 miles, which is about 320 kilometers, this exhilarating hike will challenge you and be worth every bead of sweat. This is one of the more challenging ones on the list today. Say on average, it'll take you about 15 days, and I would rate this a moderate to occasionally strenuous difficulty rating. If you don't have the time or desire to do 200 miles, you could do like I did last year, and I just did the front half, which is considered the prettier half, going through the Lake District, and you can do this as a self-guided tour in 2 parts or all in one fell swoop. I'll put a link in the show notes. Number 2 on our list for England is the Cotswold Way. This is another amazing walk that I did, and in fact, a funny story. So I met Simon from England on the West Highland Way, the one in Scotland, for the birthday party that introduced me to these walking holidays. Simon and I became friends as we walked all day, etc. You'll hear about that in the West Highland Way episode if you listen to that. And then Simon's British, so the following year when I'm doing the Cotswold Way, I connect again with Simon. He picks me up at the airport, spend the night at his place. The next night, I spend the night at his girlfriend's house, who is in the Cotswold, and I'm able to go directly from there to start my hike. And then midway through my hike, I have lunch at Simon's parents' house, which also happens to be on the Cotswold Way. So it's going into that same tangled, slinky kind of a thing. Then Shar, who I met through this podcast, also did the Cotswold Way, introduced her to Simon, and so now they're friends, and it's this really cool thing that you can experience when you have the time to get to know people on these long-distance hikes. So let's talk about the Cotswold. Truly a beautiful hike. If you can only pick one, this might be one to seriously consider. This one can actually be broken into 2 sections. The north section goes from Chipping-Campden to Painswick, or the south section goes from Painswick to Bath. So if you don't have time to do the entire walk, which is about 9 days, you can break it up roughly half and half. If you do the entire trail, it runs about 100 miles, which is about 160 kilometers, and it's only a moderate difficulty rating. It runs from the delightful Chipping-Campden all the way to Bath. This path exemplifies what you think of whenever you're imagining traditional British countryside with the charming thatched roof cottages, the country gardens, the English pubs, and the little picturesque landscape. This is the Cotswold Way. Almost the entire trail is within the Cotswold area of outstanding natural beauty. It meanders through enchanting little villages before ending in the UNESCO World Heritage City of Bath. If this hike is too long for you, like I said, you can break it up into two ways, the north or south sections. The north section takes you about 4 days, and again, it's moderately difficult. You hike through just traditional English countryside on quiet little lanes from Chipping Campden all the way to Painswick through delightful villages like Broadway, Stanton, and Chipping Campden. You can end each day in a typical British pub, and this trip is going to be about 45 miles or 70 kilometers. The south section will take about 5 days, again moderately difficult, and this section is considered to be some of England's finest landscape. You have an enchanting hike from Painswick that finishes in Bath. And be sure to stop and take a tea break along the way. This walk is about 55 miles, 90 kilometers of spectacular scenery. Path number 3 in England is the River Thames path from the source to the sea. The average walk takes about 14 or 15 days, and it's roughly 185 miles, which is around 300 kilometers. You're pretty much going from the source of the River Thames near Kemble through the stunning Cotswold area all the way down to the Thames barrier in London. So you're going to be going from the countryside all the way into London. You're going to be starting in the grasslands and woodlands, and then you're going to reach the urban epicenter. You're going to be passing some of the UK's iconic landmarks such as Buckingham Palace and Westminster Abbey at the end. Plan on staying an extra day, maybe in Oxford or Dorchester. This path offers the spectrum from quaint country villages to historic London, and it'll give you a full taste of Britain. On average, it's going to take you about 14 or 15 days to walk this path. However, there's some great places that you may want to consider taking an extra day as a layover and work that into your trip. This path is moderate with a couple of strenuous parts, and if you think that this is too long of a walk for you, consider breaking it into either one of the two sections, the west or the east. You can do the West Thames path from Kemble to Pangbourne, or you can do the East Thames path from Pangbourne into London. The West Thames path is an average walk of about 7 or 8 days for about 90 miles, or which is 140 kilometers, and it goes through the Cotswold area. You pass through some charming villages such as Dorchester and Oxford as you watch the river slowly grow to navigable size. It's moderate with a couple of strenuous areas. On the east section, the average walk is going to be 6 or 7 days for about 100 miles, which is 160 kilometers. You're going to watch the scenery go from the country grasslands and get more urban and industrial as you get past Windsor. After Teddington, you can explore the historic waterfront, and you can switch your path between the north and the south sides of the river, crossing whenever you desire at the different bridges along the way. This would be a truly cool way to re-enter London for your trip back home. Fourth on the list for England is Hadrian's Wall. This is an opportunity to combine history with your hiking holiday on this famous route from Newcastle to Bowness-on-Solway, alongside much of the remaining former Roman barrier, including Northern Europe's largest surviving Roman monument and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Hadrian was a famous Roman emperor, and this wall was the outermost reach of the empire. On the other side were those dreaded Scots, I believe they called them the Caledonians at the time. So you walk along the path of the old wall, much of which is still intact. A lot of it was cannibalized to make houses and fortresses and stuff like that in the future, but it's a really cool walk that's very historic, and so it's a great opportunity to combine your love of history with an active adventure. They have an outstanding visitor center along the wall as well. The average walk is going to be about 9 days for about 85 miles, which is 135 kilometers. You're going to see turrets and forts and multiples of the mile castles. These are little mini forts that were built about every mile along the barrier. There's plenty of museums and visitor centers to quench your thirst for history, so you get a great chance to get some exercise and learn a lot about the history. This is a superb choice for the history buff. Number 5 on our list is also a national trail, the South West Coast Path. This is a more strenuous hike that's moderate to strenuous difficulty rating and can also be broken into 2 sections. The first section is Padstow to St. Ives and averages about 5 days. You walk south from the irresistible Padstow along pristine sandy beaches or above furious ocean waves crashing to create caves against the cliffs on this Atlantic coast hike nestled between charming fishing villages and landscapes. You can rest your tired feet during a break in the secluded cove en route to St. Ives, Cornwall's most famous holiday town. Enjoy fresh-caught fish nightly on this approximately 60-mile hike, which is about 100 kilometers. The second section is St. Ives to Penzance, which averages about 4 days of hiking, again moderate to strenuous difficulty rating. You continue south on the Southwest Coast Path along the sandy beaches and cliffs on this remote and rugged section of about 40 miles, which is 65 kilometers. You'll have lots of opportunities to see wildlife, especially birds, as you continue to Land's End, Britain's westernmost point. Next up at number 6 is Pennine Way. This hike is 16 to 20 days depending on your pace and is a moderate to strenuous difficulty rating. You walk this path from south to north normally and end up by the Scottish border. You'll be crossing Hadrian's Wall, and the 2 trails path form a cross formation if you're looking at a map and ending up in northern England. You're going to be hiking through some stunning moors and through 3 national parks, the Peak District, the Yorkshire Dales, and Northumberland on the UK's first national trail. There's some gorgeous rivers and waterfalls, as well as some Roman ruins that you'll see when you're in the historic Roman Hadrian's Wall country that we talked about a little bit earlier. These breathtaking hills, dales, and moorlands, coupled with history, make this one of the UK's most endeared long-distance trails. Before we move on to Scotland and Wales, we've got one more in England, St. Cuthbert's Way, from Melrose to Lindisfarne. This is a shorter walk of about 5 days, and it's easy to moderate difficulty rating. And it's perfect for history, especially religious history buffs. This classic pilgrimage path leads to Holy Island through Northumberland and the borders of Scotland, along many places associated with the medieval St. Cuthbert, for whom this path is named. So consider taking this self-reflecting walk of approximately 60 miles or 100 kilometers through the dramatic woodland, farmland, and moorlands along the way, and then finish by crossing the tidal causeway to the medieval monastery on Holy Island. Be sure to check the tide tables before you cross the causeway. You don't want to get wet. Now let's head up to Scotland, where we've got 2 paths for you to consider. First up is the trail Great Glen Way, which averages 4 to 6 days depending on your pace on an easy to moderately difficult trail. Be on the lookout for Nessie the Monster as you walk alongside the famous Loch Ness. This gentle path starts in engaging Fort William, which is the base of Britain's highest mountain, Ben Nevis, which in itself is worth a climb. And it wanders along the moody lakes and the panoramic moors, the canals, and the forests of the Scottish Highlands on its way to Inverness. It's about 80 miles or 130 kilometers. This trail also ties in with the trail that I did, the West Highland Way, so if you're really motivated, you can do both in approximately 2 weeks. If you only have time to do one, do the West Highland Way. My friend Simon did both simultaneously. He did that right after I met him, and he enjoyed the West Highland Way much more. Number 9 on our list and number 2 in Scotland is the West Highland Way. This path averages about 7 days walking, and it's moderate to with a couple of difficult areas that aren't even that overly difficult. You've got one 14-mile day that has a lot of stepping up and down on rocks. That was a little bit more challenging than most of the days. It was probably particularly challenging for me because I had hurt my knee on that trip. And then also you've got the Devil's Staircase, which is scarier more in sound than in actuality. It's a steep hill that has a lot of carved out stepping stones out of rock, but some say that the name itself was named by the builders who had to carve out the steps. I didn't find it overly difficult, but there is a steep hill. Some people actually bike much of the West Highland Way. In fact, Simon reported that he saw somebody biking down the Devil's Staircase on what was the worst weather day of our entire adventure. Planning your adventure on the West Highland Way, pay special attention to the section between Tyndrum and King's House. It's about a 20-mile section that you have to decide if you're going to do 20 miles all in one day, or do you want to do a really short day of about 7 miles and then do the other 13 the next day, because it's very remote. And once you start, there really is you've got to go. And if the weather's bad, you still have got to go. I actually, if you listen to my episode on the West Highland Way, I was doing the 20-miler day, and I had to make a choice when I got to the 7 miles if I was going to do that 13 miles across absolutely nowhere in one of the worst weather days I've ever hiked in. I did make the decision to take the bus from that town, Bridge of Orkney, to the King's House area rather than go out in that weather because of my knee. And so just when you're doing this trip, pay close attention to that section and know your body before you plan to see whether or not you feel you can do 20 miles or not in a day. Because over that rugged moor, there is nothing. Not a shed, not a telephone pole, 0 cell service. There is nothing for 50 square miles. I hope to go back and do it one day. And it's not that the section is difficult, it's long and it is very remote. One of the nice things about using the company I used to plan my West Highland Way trip was I did get backup plans in case I needed to do something like take the bus to skip a section for whatever reason. The West Highland Way isn't Scotland's most popular long-distance trail without reason. It has gorgeous Loch Lomond that you're walking along most of the time, some scenic rivers, peaceful pastures, the remote Rannoch Moor, plus some quaint villages each night that ensure a really satisfying hike through the Highlands. This trail starts in Milngavie. I know, Jamie, I know you're listening. I can never remember how to pronounce it. Sorry about I keep screwing up the Scottish brogue. And anyway, and it finishes in Fort William, where you can pick up the Great Glen Way we just talked about. Plan to spend an extra day in Fort William to climb Ben Nevis if you can. Or also, it's a cute little town, and it's considered the outdoor capital of Scotland. I have such fond memories of my West Highland Way hike, and I hope that you will truly consider it. I've made some lifelong friends along the path, and I think you will too. It's a great, great walking holiday. And last, and certainly not least, we're heading to Wales for number 10 on our list, and that is the Pembrokeshire Coast Path. This is a long path, and it's a hard path, but it can be broken into 3 sections if you don't want to do the whole thing. The full length will take you almost 2 weeks, and like I said, it's pretty strenuous in certain sections. Experienced hikers can do the entire path. The rest of us should probably just pick a section to walk along the cliffs of the western peninsula of Wales. You can be on the lookout in season for the comical puffins and the leisurely seals as you hug this rugged coastline. You'll visit sleepy fishing villages and enjoy the catch of the day each night, and enjoy the quiet seclusion with just the crash of the waves below disturbing your thoughts. Like I said, this hike can be broken into 3 sections. Number 1 is the south section from Amroth to Pembroke, and it's about 6 days of moderate to strenuous difficulty, and it's the most popular section. Then you've got the central section from Pembroke to St. David's, which is about 6 days and also moderate to strenuous. And note that this section in the middle goes through some industrial areas. And lastly, the most difficult and remote north section from St. David's to Dogmiles. I know I mispronounced that. And that's about 5 days hiking of a strenuous difficulty rating. The entire trail is about 300 kilometers or 185 miles, and it's got a couple of 20-plus mile days, which is 32 kilometers, and all of the days are over 11 miles or 18 kilometers. So this is not a baby hike for somebody to be trying out for the first time. And if you do so, just start with the south section and do that only on this first trip, and don't do the north section until you know if you're a strong enough hiker. But if you're a strong hiker and you're looking for some rugged, remote coastline, this is the path for you. Since this episode was first published and I became affiliated with One Foot Abroad, I noticed when I was doing research and editing this thing that they do a trip called the Ridgeway that was not on my original list. The Ridgeway is considered England's oldest path at over 4,000 years. So if you are looking for something that's very quiet and meditative, it's not going to be as over-trafficked as some like the West Highland Way can get a little busy. You might want to consider the Ridgeway. It runs about a 10-day hike. It's roughly 85 miles, 138 kilometers, and you're going to go through ancient sceneries, through isolated woodlands and valleys. You'll see remnants of old forts, ancient long barrows, a barrow being one of the ancient burial mounds. And you'll go through some really cute villages, including some UNESCO World Heritage sites. So I've added that to this year's list, so now we're at 11 instead of the 10 that we originally had back 7 years ago or whatever it was. This one is probably one of the easier of the trails, and because it's not as popular, your accommodations may not be as nice because it's not heavily touristed. So if you're looking for something just to get inside your head and just to have some peace and quiet, consider the Ridgeway. Again, you can find more details about all of these paths on the activetraveladventures.com website, and the travel planner includes links to all of these. Don't forget, if you would like to use my affiliate One Foot Abroad, email me at kit@activetraveladventures.com. I can save you a little bit of money with an exclusive promo code. I'm no longer publishing the promo code, so you do need to email me. I don't add you to the newsletter if you email me, unless you ask me to. So don't worry about that. It's just one way that as the promo codes change, I'm giving you the most current code. Well, that rounds out the top of what I consider to be the best walking holidays in the UK. We've gone north to south, east to west, and all over the most gorgeous scenery the United Kingdom has to offer. If you've never done an adventure trip before, one of these walking holidays is a great way to get your feet wet in a truly fun way to interact with the locals and get a real taste and flavor of a country. Plus, they're speaking English, so listening to this, I know you must speak at least some English, so you won't have the language barrier to deal with. You only have one currency to deal with, the British pound. And it's just the people are lovely, welcoming, and it's a great way to truly immerse yourself in a new culture and get some great exercise along the way. You'll be tired at the end of the day, but a good, happy tired. Your feet will hurt, but they'll be fine the next morning, and you'll be raring to go all over again. And I would guarantee you, if you do one of these trips, as soon as you get home, you'll be planning your next active adventure. I hope you've enjoyed learning about these beautiful long-distance walks in the UK. To learn more, check out activetraveladventures.com and the One Foot Abroad website. And remember, as an ADA listener, you get a discount, so be sure to email me for the current discount promo code at kit@activetraveladventures.com. And be sure to share this episode with your family and adventurous friends, and consider making your next vacation a bonding walking holiday. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on!